Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alan Blumkin from the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and we're doing another podcast of Pittsburgh sports. I want to welcome back my co-host on this series, David Finoli. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Al. How are you doing today?
All right. Hanging in there. It was really something last night. There was no football, no baseball.
I know.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, if you like soccer, a dark day in U.S. soccer.
Yeah, well.
But that was the highlight yesterday.
Yeah. So they saved themselves from, getting beaten in the World Cup. But, I'll get up tomorrow. You'll get up tomorrow, and everything will be the same.
Exactly, and that's
okay.
There's a lot of comments there of the death of U.S. soccer because of this, but it's comical because this team doesn't ever do much in the World Cup. So
yeah, I know.
But, anyways, we got some baseball.
Today we're going to discuss the 1960 World Series. Let me do a little background on this. The Pirates were out-hit in this series 331 to 256. They were outscored 55-27, and the Yankees set all sorts of records for a 7-game series, except they didn't win 4 games. So it was probably with some people the most memorable World Series of their youth, and for some people it's a lifetime. So we're going to discuss what happened in that series and why. David, would you like to start us off?
No problem. Absolutely. 1960 was a surprise year for the Pirates. They had broken out after a decade of bad baseball, which was, to me, when you look at it, produced many more worse teams than what 20 years of losing did recently in Pittsburgh. But 1958, Danny Murtaugh in his first full season led the team to a shocking 84-win season. Injuries kind of curtailed things a little in 59, but in 60, this young team came out and pretty much controlled the National League from the get-go. They started off with a great record in April, and if I'm not mistaken, it was towards mid-July that they ended up just taking a hold of the division and then running with it. July was the only really hiccup in the season when they finished the month 15 and 14. But if you look at it, what an offense! It was a team that ended up having the rarity of leading the National League in runs scored, and they also tied for the low in runs given up with the Dodgers at 593. So it wasn't a flukish National League title by any stretch of the imagination. Some classic players, a nice solid offense with Smokey Burgess, Dick Stewart, their power man at first, Dr. Strangeglove, Bill Maz had a solid season at 273, Dick Groat, the MVP, although missing the last month of the year with a wrist injury, but Dick Schofield came in and hit 333 for the year and just did a more than acceptable job replacing him. Don Hoke, which hit 282, who was the emotional fireball of the team. Bill Verdon, certainly one of the great defensive center fielders in the history of Pirate baseball. Clemente with his first true breakout year, 16 homers, 94 RBIs, 314 batting average. Certainly a solid bench with Gino Cimoli, Hal Smith, and Rocky Nelson, and while Roy Face and Fred Green were the two best relievers, the starters didn't need a strong bullpen, as Friend, Law, and Mizell were outstanding, with Haddix probably the weak link of the four to a point, but certainly with a decent year. Al, out of that group, tell me what are some of your great memories of the players?
Oh, I know they won something like, I'm not sure the exact number, but they won something like 30 games in the last time at bat.
Yeah, which says a lot about
incredible. And I listened to a lot of the games, night games, during the summer on WWVA in Wheeling, which was fairly easy to pick up in New York because the KKA was impossible because it was sandwiched between two 50,000-watt stations here. And there was a game against the Braves, I think it was in early July, where Bob Skinner threw a Braves runner out of the home to protect either a lead or a tie. And they did this type of thing all season. I mean, right away in April, there was a doubleheader with the Reds, where in the second game, they got 6 runs in the bottom of the ninth to win 6-5, and it just went on like that all season.
Right.
And, they finally clinched it about a week and a half to go. And as you mentioned, Dick Grote was sidelined for the month, and Dick Schofield played out of his mind for the month that he was in there. And it was a good, solid team. They beat out the Braves, and they beat out the Cardinals, who were the two main threats during the season. And they went on, going into the World Series facing a Yankee team that had just won the American League pennant by, I think, 7 or 8 games. And the Yankees were closed the season with a 15-game winning streak.
Right, which wasn't unlike the Baltimore Orioles in '71.
Yeah.
Another team, if I'm not mistaken, they were 16 games towards the end of the season, plus sweeping the American League Championship Series.
Yeah, and so anyway, they opened the series in Forbes Field, and it's the first World Series game that has been playing there since 1927. Pirates hadn't won anything in 33 years. And Casey Stengel, he would be terribly second-guessed for this after the series, started Art Ditmar for the Yankees. Art Ditmar led them with 15 wins. Whitey Ford that year had a sore arm a good portion of the season and wound up with a record of 12-9, which was his worst season up until 1965. So Stengel decided he'd save Whitey Ford for Yankee Stadium, and so he started Ditmar, and the Pirates got to him right away.
Right. Yeah, he didn't go more than a third of an inning, if I'm not mistaken.
No. In fact, Dick Grote told me when I interviewed him in 1985 that when Verdon supposedly stole second, and when there was an error there by the Yankees and wound up scoring, that there was a missed hit and run sign.
Ah, okay. Okay,
but that they got Ditmar out of there pretty easily, and they won that game 6-4. Mazeroski hit a home run in that game, and,
which would be the last one until he came up in the bottom of the ninth.
I don't think they
I'm sorry. He didn't. There were a couple of home runs, certainly. I apologize, in Game 7, but that was the last one till Game 7.
Yeah, I mean, that was the last one till Game 7. And, they brought Elroy Face in, Vernon Law, who was pitching on a bad ankle, which he hurt in the celebration of all things.
Yeah.
And, Elroy Face came in to finish it off. Yeah,
he did. And, certainly got the save, although gave up a couple runs in the top of the ninth, unearned. But the Pirates do hold on for that first victory. Now, you were at Pitt at that time, correct?
Yeah. I was a freshman, yeah.
Okay. What was that feeling after the first game? A little confidence by the Pirates?
That they were going to, not going to go quietly. Everybody, people I talked to thought that, there's an aberration and the Yankees will come back and beat them 4 straight, which after games 2 and 3 looked like it might happen.
Right. Now Bob Friend comes in, who certainly had a good year and didn't have his best of games, so to speak, although, the score was still 3-1 at the end of 4 when Bob Friend was done.
He was 4 in the 4th inning, yeah.
Yeah. So then comes in Fred Green and Clem Labine, the former Dodger, and all hell broke loose.
How's on Mantle hit the shot over the center field wall there?
Yeah.
Fred Green threw that pitch, yeah.
Right. They give up 7 runs in the 6th, 3 in the 7th, lose the game 16-3, getting 19 hits, and the Pirate defense certainly not playing well, giving up 6 earned runs, not that it would have made much difference. But again, at that point in time, your Yankee, because this was, even though it was coming to the end of the Yankee dynasty, it still was a very, very
they would win
powerful Yankee team.
They would win they came back in 1960 after a disastrous 1959 by their standards, and they made the trade where they got Roger Maris from the farm team in Kansas City, the American League farm team in Kansas City A's. And they gave up for him. They gave up Norm Seaburn, who Stengel couldn't stand after he messed up a few fly balls in the 58 series. A washed-up Doug Lawson, an over-the-hill Hank Bauer, who they sent home because he lived out there to where he retires as an active player, and marvelous Marv Thornberry, who later would go on to immortality with the 1962 Mets.
The Mets, absolutely. Now, in Game 3, first game in Yankee Stadium, you're sending Vinegar Ben Mizell, who was 13-5 in 60, great addition in the middle of the season from the Cardinals, and just was a key component to them coming back. Well, he pulls the same thing that Ditmar did in Game 1. He goes a third of an inning, gives up 4 runs, and Clem Labine again gives up a couple, and it's 6-0 before the Pirates get at that. Now they're throwing out Whitey Ford, who you mentioned. Certainly questionable why he didn't start Game 1, and he comes through and just pitches a 4-hit shutout. You would have had to think at that point. Now, were you were a Pirate fan by this point?
Yeah. The only time I've ever rooted against the Yankees in the World Series.
And I mean, what were your thoughts at that point after just 2 of?
No, I thought, most of the people thought, that was basically after that third game that basically that was it. And when I interviewed Dick Roth way back when in 1985, I asked him what was the attitude in the clubhouse after that third game. Murtaugh, got the team together and he said, "We're down 2-1. Nobody, they don't pay you on runs scored."
Yeah.
And he said the atmosphere was, was subdued, but they weren't, quite ready to throw in the towel.
Yeah. Well, and Vern Law, who was incredible during the season after a loss, which was one of the key components to me on why he was the Cy Young Award winner and the best pitcher in the National League that year. Takes the mound for Game 4 you lose this game and you're pretty much done, I would assume.
Oh yeah. And they won that game 3-2. There was a controversial play a couple of controversial plays in that game. There was one on a double play ball that Yogi Berra was called out at first base. And when I got the video of the 60 series, they showed that. So I was over a friend's house. I played it in slow motion a bunch of times, and Yogi looked like he was safe. And then there was a play at third base where, Bill Verdon was safe. And Bill Verdon had his hand on a lot of key plays offensively during that series. And I only discovered that when I did, before I interviewed Grote in 1985, I did a play-by-play analysis during that series. I was amazed by the number of times Verdon showed up in the key offensive situations.
Well, there was also talking about great defensive plays in the bottom of the 7th, and I discovered this. I recently purchased the radio calls of the Pirates' victories.
Yeah.
And in the 7th inning, with 1 out, McDougal's on first after a single. Richardson Blanchard singles to right with 2 out. And a ball that many thought, at least the announcers at the time, thought Richardson was going to third when Clemente unleashes just an incredible throw, holding him to second. Well, the next play serve hits a deep fly ball to center field, and at that point in time, McDougal would have scored, certainly, which would have tied the game at the end. But in essence, because of Clemente's throw and keeping him at second, to me, that is one of the most underrated plays of the series, because, you tie the game at that point and you take a chance on losing. And if you lose that game, the series is over. So, and you're right. I mean, Bill Verdon made several great defensive gems that kept them in this game.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Vernon Law got a key hit for them when they scored. Yeah,
absolutely. He doubled the left, knocking in Finoli in the fifth inning. But with the injury and his ankle, in talking to him later on, his ankle was not in good shape. But he had what was a very gutsy 6 innings. He gave up 8 hits and a walk in 6 innings, but only 2 runs. And Roy faced 2 2/3 no-hit innings, just dominating the Yankees over the course of the last plays or last couple innings. But Vern Law got a lot of great help from Verdon and Clemente that day that kept that team in. There were a lot of times that the announcers were just sure that a ball was going to get through for a hit that Verdon would run down.
Yeah, I believe that the losing pitcher for the Yankees was Ralph Terry, who
yes
would appear one more time in this series.
Yes, he would.
And in Game 5, they were still playing in Yankee Stadium, and the Pirates started Harvey Haddix against Ditmar again. And
yes.
Ditmar was chased fairly early again. And Haddix went, I think, pitched into the 7th. And Verdon made another tremendous catch out there after Elroy Face had come in. And,
absolutely.
And Face essentially saved the game again for the Pirates. And they won
another
that
2 2/3 hitless. So, I mean, over the course of those 2 games, I mean, he was unhittable. He gave up a walk in over 5 innings pitched. This was the one game that I don't want to say the Pirates won comfortably, but the pitching really stifled the Yankees this day, and they scored the 3 runs in the second inning. Don Hoke getting on an error, which scored Samoli, and Bill Mazeroski, who certainly put in his. If a Pirate had won an MVP, his home run aside, I mean, he certainly might have been the most effective hitter for the Pirates over the course of the series. Doubles to left, knocking in 2, giving the Pirates a 3-0 lead. Again, Yankee, you certainly knew the pulse of the Yankees at that point. Certainly the fans. After that game had to have devastated them.
Excuse me. They go back to Pittsburgh after that game for Game 6. The Yankees start Ford. The Pirates start Bob Friend again. And that game was another one that was over very early. The Yankees won that game 12-0. And Ford pitched the second shutout, and Friend had very little, and they just clobbered them again. So everybody's they're wondering how come there's a Game 7 there. Yeah. Because, they were being outscored, and, all the numbers I mentioned earlier in the podcast were taking shape. So Game 7 turned out to be, to me, the most incredible baseball game I've ever followed. Even more incredible than the Bobby Thompson miracle home run game in 1951. And I see these people putting up Carlton Fisk's home run in Game 6 of 1975 ahead of Mazeroski. I say to these people, I said, that was in Game 6, and if I remember correctly, the Red Sox lost the 7th game.
They lost the series.
They lost the series,
that wins the series certainly trumps that. No ifs, ands, or buts. The only problem when people rate these things sometimes is they go with the home run they saw on TV and
Exactly, yeah.
Forgetting.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily this game was there was a great story about this game. Bing Crosby, who owned the team, was so nervous he went to France and didn't want to be around to watch the game because he was so nervous to watch it. Directed the people at NBC to do a kinescope of the game, so he could watch it when he gets back. Well, about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they're doing a documentary on Bing Crosby, going through his personal lot of film, and somebody looks and sees Game 7 of World Series in a film tin, and decides to investigate, and they find the entire Game 7 on kinescope, which Major League Baseball luckily distributed in DVD form, and myself, who never had seen the game before, just was in amazement watching this thing. I mean, it must have been just a thrill of a lifetime to see it live.
It was crazy. I was watching it with a group of people in the dorm. We skipped classes that day. And after Hal Smith hit the home run in the 8th inning, my friend and I were 17 years old at the time. What did we know? We ran down the 11 floors from where the dorm was, during the dorm, and I had a cheap transistor radio, and we ran the 2 blocks to Forbes Field. We went to the left field bleacher entrance, and lo and behold, nobody was guarding it. So we snuck in as the Yankees were tying the game up in the top of the ninth with this. They were on our knees not to block anybody's view, and we were there for the Mazeroski home run. It was, I still feel to this day if that game had gone longer, we would have been in deep trouble.
Now, you had said, as I talked to you earlier, that as Mazeroski swung, the place was quiet as
the place was, you could have heard a pin drop. And then when it went over the wall, and the whole place just exploded, and it lasted all through the night.
Oh, man. Now, in interviewing Vern Law for a book I did, he gave me this great quote. You watched the game and you experienced it, so you could tell me if he's full of it or this is actually true. Vern Law basically said, had Murtaugh left him in the game in the 5th, that the Pirates would have won the game easily, and Mazeroski never would have got the chance to hit the home run. He chuckled and said, Maz should thank me for getting him a spot in the Hall of Fame. Did you get that feel? I mean, as I watched
I got the feel that he was really hurting.
Yeah, and he was done. He gave me.
He was done, and they brought in Elroy Face, who had been sensational, and all 3 of the Pirate wins to that point. But Elroy didn't have it that day.
Right.
Now, of course, with the way they treat pitchers, they probably would have made him available for the 7th game after the 5th game. And Yogi Berra hit the home run off of him. In fact, one of the things that Danny Murtaugh did was he started Rocky Nelson at first base instead of Dick Stewart. And Rocky Nelson,
which ended up being a great move.
Yeah, who had been up something like 200 times during the regular season, is batting cleanup in the 7th game of the World Series, and he hit a home run in the 1st inning to put the Pirates at 2-0.
Yeah,
and the Yankees added 2 more in the top of the 8th to make it 7-4. Bobby Shantz, who had replaced Bob Turley, who was a starting pitcher. It was Turley, then Stafford, then Shantz. Bill Stafford was a rookie at that time. Shantz, they couldn't touch Shantz until the bottom of the 8th inning when Gino Cimoli led off with a single, pinch hitting. Then they brought up Verdon, and he hit, as most people who know anything about this game, he would have been a perfect double play ball to Tony Kubek at shortstop. The ball came up, hit Kubek in the throat, and all hands were safe.
Yeah.
And
that wasn't the only bizarre play.
No, the next one, Dick Grote, and Grote told me when I interviewed him that at bat, his hand wasn't 100% shape yet. He said that at bat was by far the toughest of his career.
Yeah.
and he wound up getting a single that drove home Finoli, made it 7-5,
Mm-hmm.
and Stengel pulled Chance after that and brought in Jim Coates.
Okay.
Okay, so they had Skinner sacrifice to put second and third. The next batter, who escapes me right now, hit a fly ball.
Rocky Nelson.
Rocky Nelson hit a fly ball to the outfield, which nobody could score on. Then Clemente came up, and he hit a roller between pitcher and first base. And Skowron came off first base to pick it up, pick the ball up, turn to throw, and there's nobody there.
Now, Chance was on at the time, correct?
Yeah, it was Coates. Chance was a tremendous fielding pitcher.
Now he gets a lot, in my eyes, he gets a lot of crap for not covering, but from the way I see it, I don't think there's any way he beats Clemente to the base.
Yeah. More often I've seen that play. As much as I dislike Coates for a variety of reasons, he was in no man's land. That ball was in no man's.
Yeah. No, so he, I didn't think he had a chance to make it there.
And that's made the score 7-6, and up comes Hal Smith, who had gone in for Smokey Burgess, who of course was pinch run for earlier. And Hal Smith, I spoke to Johnny Blanchard at a card show in 1987 about this game. He was catching because Elsenhauer was hurt and Berra was in left field.
Uh-huh.
And they knew Hal Smith from the American League because he had played the previous 5 seasons with the Orioles and the Kansas City A's. And they knew he was a dead fastball hitter. So Blanchard told me he put down a bunch of signs for breaking balls, and Coach shook him off all the time. So he went out to the mound and asked Coach what he wanted to throw. He says, a fastball. He said, you can't throw this guy a fastball because he'll hit it. And Coach says, I'm throwing him a fastball. So Blanchard finally gave up. Coach threw him a fastball, and he hit it over the wall to make it 9-7. They scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 8th inning.
Right. Now Hal Smith at this point in time is, the god of Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And so everybody assumed that's after, as I mentioned earlier, after the Smith home run is when my friend and I left the dorm and went over to Forbes Field. And, we didn't know, not know anything about getting advance tickets or anything. We probably would have gone to all of them if we had known anything about it.
Right.
But, and everybody expected they're taking the 2-run lead into the 9th, and they should, hold it fairly easily. Well, they didn't. They brought Friend in again, and he was ineffective again, and he gave up the 2 tying runs. Now, we got there into the ballpark in time to see the ball where Berra hit that Nelson made the pickup on tag first, and Mantle dove back into first base.
Now, what kind of tremendous, just brilliant play was made? 99.
I don't know. I think he may have decided that this was a line drive.
Yeah.
And dove back into first base. Gil McDougall, who was playing the last game of his career, was the runner on third base, and he scored. And I asked Dick Grote when I talked to him, what do you think would have happened if Dick Stewart was playing first base at the time? And he said he didn't want to contemplate that.
I don't blame him.
I said, let's move on. I said, fine. So they brought in Harvey Haddix to relieve Friend, and he got the last out of the inning. Everybody in Forbes Field was, demoralized. So we had it, and now we're blowing it again. Up comes Mazeroski, in comes Ralph Terry. And the second pitch, Maz hit the ball over the wall, and they won the game 10-9. It was just a total unbelievable experience. It was just, something that it's really hard to believe that it's been 57 years already with this.
But still, in my eyes, not just the greatest home run of all time, but in my eyes, and maybe it's slanted by Pirate loyalty, but I can't imagine anybody saying there was a greater game. The great John Thorne, the official historian of Major League Baseball, recently has called it the greatest game ever played. I can't imagine anybody disputing that. I mean, the excitement, the back and forth, the huge underdog against a powerful dynasty, and a man who's not known for his power ends it on the only time in Major League history in a deciding game. There's just too much to this to say it wasn't the greatest game.
There's a couple of things from what I read. Mantle was sitting in the clubhouse crying, and the Yankees, who were both there in '55 when they lost to Brooklyn, and took this one a lot harder. The Pirates lost a lot harder than they did losing to the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the other thing was that Roger Maris, who was screaming, supposedly screaming, yelling in the clubhouse, was up 5 times and fouled out a couple of times. And the 5 times he was up, he didn't advance the runner.
Well, what was he screaming about?
How that they were better. And the other thing is that game was 10-9. It took 2 hours and 36 minutes. And
no strikeouts.
No strikeouts.
Which is still amazing.
Yeah, absolutely no strikeouts.
Now, Bill Mazeroski, who I always felt was deserving of the Hall of Fame because of his defensive prowess, considered the greatest defensive second baseman by many experts. What do you think when you hear of the criticism he's only there because of his home run?
Well, my standard response is that look at Ozzie Smith and Louis Aparicio and a couple others of that ilk that are in there because of their defense, not because they were they were good offensively.
And there's there's no disputing he was a genius defensively. I want to say 9 Gold Gloves. Held the record for most double plays in a season, most double plays in a career. Just on the film, now by the time I started following the Pirates, he was towards the end of his career, but on every film I've ever seen of him, he was just so smooth, such textbook.
They used to call him no touch.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't necessarily because he had the range of Ozzie Smith, but he was such a brilliant defender that he could read the hitters and knew where to be.
And Blanchard also told us, there were a few of us around when he started talking about this, and he said after the game in the Yankee clubhouse, Coates went up to Ralph Terry and said, "Thanks for getting me off the hook." Coates was not very well liked. He was
no. Yeah, that's a jerk thing to say. But poor Ralph. I mean, in '62, if not
62, he got an opportunity to. He got an opportunity for. Hand the second opportunity. He shut the Giants out in the last game of the 1962 World Series. But he almost lost that too. If I'm not mistaken, McCovey sliced a line drive that looked like it was going through, and Richardson the key
made a nice play on it.
The key play was Roger Maris. They had a runner on 2 men, runner on first, and Maris fielded a ball and threw home, and it held the giant runner at third base.
Yeah,
this was right before McCovey came up, and that basically saved it for the Yankees. And that game was like the 1909 series. The teams alternated in wins, the Giants and the Yankees.
Right.
But the Pirate team was really, 1960 was really, really destined. And it was, in fact, what's ironic is that when I spoke to Grote in 1985, that became the basis of my first presentation at a SABR meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I boiled it down to the last 2 innings of that game, and it went over well here. It's the first time I ever spoke in public, and I took it out to Oakland for the national convention that year, and it went over tremendously well there. I played some cuts from the Grote interview, and I asked him where he was when Mazeroski hit the home run. He says he was getting his batting helmet because they were going to send up Stewart to pinch hit for Haddix. Had Mazeroski made out, and Grote was on deck.
Now, which Grote? And just your opinion. Now, he is the MVP race that year is controversial in two aspects. The first, that while he led the league in hitting, he was out the entire month of September. And the second part of that, while I don't think he deserved the MVP necessarily, Clemente certainly bitter by finishing eighth behind Dick Hoke of other people, which I thought he was a more valuable player to the Pirates than Dick Hoke.
Don Hoke.
Never wore his...
Don Hoke. Dick was a stealer.
It was Clemente never wore his ring, instead choosing to wear his All-Star ring that year because he was bitter at being selected eighth in the thing. But if you look at some of the seasons that year, Aaron 40 homers, 126 RBIs, Ernie Banks 41, 117. There were a lot of great seasons that year. Frank Robinson had a nice year. Eddie Matthews.
Banks would have been the third in a row. They had given it to him.
Exactly. It seemed like it probably was on the lines of a Zoilo Versailles MVP in '65 as far as.
Yeah, I think he's the worst position player ever got an MVP since the award started.
Right. And I've always kind of thought Dick Grote might. Well, not as bad as him, but probably in the ballpark. I'm not sure he should have won that award. What was your thought about that?
I was surprised, but it was not a very good hitting year. Grote hit 325 and, was a batting champion. And the second in the batting race was a Dodger first baseman named Norm Walker, who had a career year, hit 323. But, they weren't, and I think that they were more geared at that particular point to select somebody from the team that won.
Yeah. Did you think he was more deserving than Clemente?
No, but I don't think Clemente was a public face at that point.
No. His thought was always it was because of his heritage and his skin that he was. In
1951, the American League, the writers shortchanged Minnie Minoso, who should have been Rookie of the Year, and they shortchanged Minoso a few times. So there may have been a bias still at that point against Hispanic players because there really weren't that many of them, and there really weren't very many of them that were superstars at that point.
Right.
It took Clemente another few years before he finally got the MVP in 1966. And when he started winning the batting title in 1961, people started looking at him more and more. So I think it was basically a question. I think the main question on Clemente in 1960 was visibility.
Well, that could be conceivable. I know it was something that did upset him at that point. But you're right. It wasn't the day of mass media. So
I never understood why they gave the MVP of the series award to Bobby Richardson.
No,
I don't care if he knocked in 12 runs. His team lost.
Absolutely. Mazeroski hit 320, 2 homers. You mentioned great defensive play from Clemente and Verdon in the outfield, and Vern Law pitched spectacular. So I would have personally given it to Mazeroski because he played a phenomenal series. It wasn't just a single hit that he did there. But I agree with you. I find it tough, especially in a series, to give an MVP to a team that lost.
It's very impossible because he didn't contribute much in the games that they lost by 1 or 2 runs.
Right.
And if you hit get a lot of hits, driving a lot of runs and blowouts.
Right.
It just didn't really make any sense to me at all.
Doesn't make a lot of sense at all. I would agree with you.
And the reason that team is looked on by a lot of people as a fluke was because they fell all the way to sixth place in 1961 when Vernon Law basically was out for the most of the season when his elbow went.
Had a lot of injuries, but I mean they ended up for the most part through the mid '60s of having some good teams.
Well, they had a good year in 1962, but then after that season they traded Grote to the Cardinals essentially for Don Cardwell because they thought Dick Schofield could be an everyday shortstop, which he wasn't.
He wasn't, no.
So until they brought up Gene Alley and made him the regular shortstop in late 1964, there was really a big hole there.
Right, and Grote certainly had a great '64 for the
Cardinals.
So he showed he wasn't done by any stretch. You know, and to me, a fluke is a team that maybe finishes in the middle of the pack and runs scored, gives up a few too many runs, but wins a lot of games kind of flukishly, which you don't get in baseball as much. And this team led the league in runs, led the league in least runs given up. So to me, that's there's nothing fluky about it. I mean,
no.
It shows
one of the other interesting trivia on that series was there were three pitchers who won two games, which was Vernon Law, Harvey Haddix, and Whitey Ford, and three pitchers who lost two games, Ditmar, Terry, and Bob Friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Friend probably put one of the worst World Series performances in Pirate history, that series.
No, I think it was the worst postseason by a starter in Pirate history, except for John Smiley's near 24 ERA in the 1991 LCS against the Braves.
Yes, that was a killer.
But Friend, they were able to, for some reason, they were able to club a Friend, and they had the relief pitchers that I think they used the 4 or 5 of the same ones in all three of the losses.
Right. And I mean, Fred Green certainly a horrid series. Clem Labine was beaten badly every time he was in there. So certainly a lot of bad performances too. But being out there to start and just get beat up like Fred did, and then coming in relief in a clutch situation and blowing it there too. I mean, he's certainly in my mind, at least the most. My mind was the most disappointing.
Well, the Yankees had a great, we didn't have a great starting staff after Ford. I mean, Terry was okay.
Right.
Ditmar, they traded Ditmar in mid-61 back to the A's. And Bob Turley, who was essentially finished after his great year in 1958.
Right. Now you do believe that had Whitey Ford started the first game and pitched 3 times, that changes the complexity of the series.
Yeah,
right there.
And the Yankees after that series retired Casey Stengel and the general manager George Weiss, and they got rid of Casey, and they said he retired, and he said I was discharged. That was the term he used for being fired, and he said I'll never make the mistake of being 70 again.
Being 70 again, yes. Absolutely.
So and the story was that they got rid of him because Ralph Houck, who was the manager in waiting, was starting to receive offers from other teams, and the Yankees wanted to make him the manager. And Weiss retired, and of course, another year or so, they would both wind up in the front office of the Mets.
Yep,
Weiss and Stein.
Absolutely. Controlling another classic Major League team, but for all the wrong reasons.
And Denny Murtaugh would, retire after 1964, come back for a little bit in 1967, and then he came back in 1970 and managed in 1970 and 1971, where he would win another World Series with the Pirates.
Absolutely. In fact, until Chuck Tanner, no manager who succeeded Danny Murtaugh ever succeeded him. He replaced every one of them until Chuck Canner came, and that was because Danny unfortunately passed away.
Yeah, and I asked Grow about Danny Martois. He insisted that we all make the ABC, which was his term for basic plays.
Right.
And that's what they focused on. They were able to make the basic plays and essentially not give the other team extra outs.
Exactly, and that it sounds like a little thing, but it's huge. I mean, you see in today's game, doing the fundamental, not doing the fundamentals, not keeping guys from advancing, things like that. I mean, it costs you extra at bats, it costs you positioning, it costs you runs.
I asked Grote whether he thought of the contemporary players. This is 32 years ago. He said they're much better athletes than we were, but we played a much heavier game. I guess anybody who's retired will always say that.
Yeah.
But I read an interview with him several months later in the Collectors Magazine, Sports Collectors Digest, and was totally consistent with what he told me that day.
Well, and just my recollection of watching the game then and watching it today, I would tend to concur with that thought and wholeheartedly agree with it.
And the game
sometimes today's players use their athleticism without necessarily.
No, they're making so much money. A lot of them feel there's no reason to improve. I'm getting $5 million for batting 220 and striking out 200 times. Why should I do any better? Still getting paid.
Game.
Yeah, I know it's a different game, a different day. But let's wrap this up. This has been a fascinating trip down memory lane. And obviously, it's something that any Pirate fan who is old enough to remember, and I know they're having a gathering at the Forbes Field Remnants on Friday.
Have you ever gotten the chance to see that?
Yeah, and John Likewire, I don't know if you know the name. He said he's coming down with some of his stuff he has from that season, and I told him I'll be there in spirit.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've made the trip 3 times before. It is if you are in Pittsburgh on Friday and not doing anything, it is well worth your.
I'm sure it is.
It's a tremendous experience.
Yeah.
But you were there. You were there live, and
I was there live. Yeah. Basically, I was 17 years old at the time, and it was just absolutely exciting. Another thing I asked Dick Grote was whether or not it would have had the same impact if they were beating some other American League team. He said absolutely not.
No, I would agree with that. But next week we're going to talk about the 1971
series. Yes,
certainly a historical team to boot, and we'll talk then, my friend.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Alan Blumkin again on the Comfortably Zone Radio Network. We will be doing the 1971 World Series on the next podcast next week. Thank you for listening to this. Take care. Thank you, David.
Sure. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.